My adoptive parents opened 7 credit cards in my name on the morning of my 18th birthday. They told me, when I found out about it 8 years later, that it had been a family emergency. They said it the way some families say a child has been sick. They said it the way some families say a marriage has been struggling. They said it like I was supposed to understand without asking what the emergency had been. I did not understand. I asked. I kept asking. What I eventually found out, in a small storage unit in a town 2 hours from where I had grown up, in a brown cardboard box my adoptive mother had not been brave enough to throw away, was that the family emergency had not been about me. The family emergency had not been about money, in the way I had thought. The family emergency had been about a woman I had never met, who had been writing me letters for 15 years, who was still alive when I was 8 years old, and 10 years old, and 15 years old, and 20 years old, and who was now, at the moment I was discovering all of this, in a hospice care center 40 miles from my apartment, with 3 weeks left to live. She was my biological mother. I had not known I was adopted. I had been adopted at 16 days old. My adoptive parents had decided, when I was small, that the truth would be too much for me to carry. They had decided again when I was a teenager. They had decided again when I was an adult. They had been deciding it, on a rolling basis, for 26 years. Every single time the question of whether to tell me had come up. Every time the answer had been the same. Not yet. She is not ready. She would be hurt. We are protecting her. What they were actually protecting was a story. The story was the story of being my parents. The story did not have room in it for another mother. So they had quietly paid for my biological mother's medical care for 19 years, while telling no one, not even me, that she existed. And the credit cards they had opened in my name on the morning of my 18th birthday had been opened because, in that particular year, the medical bills had grown larger than they could cover with their own money, and they had decided, in a moment I cannot really judge them for without having been them, to use my newly adult credit to cover what their own credit could not. The debt was $40,000 by the time I found out. The debt was not the worst part. I had told you the debt was not the worst part. I want you to understand before I tell you the rest of this, that the debt was almost the easy part. The hard part was sitting in a small storage unit in California with a brown cardboard box on my lap, reading a letter from a woman who had been writing me, on my birthday every year, since I was 11, and who had been told every year by the people I had grown up calling my parents that I did not want to hear from her. My name is Tahira Nazari. I am 26 years old. I am a high school history teacher in Sacramento. I have spent the last 8 months trying to figure out what to do with the family I have, the family I just found, the lies that built the first one, and the love that somehow was also real. This is the most complicated story I have ever told anybody. I am going to try to tell it honestly. Before I do, hit subscribe, and tell me one thing in the comments. Tell me about the moment you discovered that somebody you loved had been protecting you from something painful by hiding it from you. Tell me how old you were. Tell me what you decided to do with the discovery. I read every comment. Now let me take you back to my 18th birthday. Because that is where the story I thought I was living turned out to be a different story than the one I was actually inside. I want to tell you about my parents first, before I tell you what they did. Because the rest of this story does not work if you walk away thinking they were monsters. They were not monsters. They were people. People are more complicated than monsters. People are harder to hate. My adoptive father is named Yusuf Nazari. He is a pharmacist. He emigrated from Lahore in 1984 when he was 22. He has worked at the same independent pharmacy in suburban Sacramento for 35 years. He is a quiet, careful man. He drinks 1 cup of tea every morning at 6:15. He reads the newspaper from the front to the back, even the parts that do not interest him, because he believes that being informed is a moral duty. He has never raised his voice at me in 26 years. He has also, until last spring, never told me a single true thing about who I actually was. My adoptive mother is Zainab Nazari. She is a librarian. She emigrated from Karachi in 1986 when she was 19. She works at the public library in our town. She knows the name of every regular patron and the name of every book those patrons have been requesting for years. She is small and warm and the kind of mother who keeps a tin of cookies on top of the refrigerator that she pretends she does not know how to make, but that she actually makes from scratch every Sunday afternoon while listening to old Pakistani film music on a small speaker she keeps next to the stove. She loves me. I want you to know that. She loves me more than almost anybody I have ever met loves anybody. The love is not in question. The love is what makes the rest of this difficult. I have an adoptive brother named Hamza. He is 3 years younger than me. He was also adopted, although he was a domestic adoption from a different birth family, which is a detail that turns out to matter to the story. He has known he was adopted since he was 11. My parents had decided to tell him around the time he started middle school. Hamza has known, for 15 years, that I did not know. He has carried that knowledge in his teeth, the way younger brothers carry things they did not ask to know. I do not blame Hamza. We will get to him. He is not the villain of this story either. None of us are villains. We are all people who got swept up inside a decision somebody else made when I was a baby, and we have been figuring out, in our own ways, how to live with what that decision turned us into. My 18th birthday was a quiet day. I had insisted on it. I had not wanted a party. My parents had taken me out to dinner at a small restaurant my mother liked, and they had given me a card and a small box of pastries from the bakery I used to walk past on my way home from high school. Inside the card had been a check for $200 and a handwritten message from my father that I have kept in a drawer ever since. The message had said, "Tahira, you are 18. The world is yours. Love, your father." What had not been in the card was an explanation that, 3 days earlier, my parents had used my social security number, my newly issued driver's license, and a piece of mail that had arrived at the house in my name, to apply for 7 credit cards in my name with a combined credit limit of $47,000. They had used the cards to pay down medical bills my biological mother had accumulated at a hospital in San Francisco. They had set up the cards to be paid from a separate account they had been using for years to manage her care. They had assumed, correctly, that I would never see a credit report for myself for a long time because I had no reason to. They had been right about that for almost 8 years. I had not pulled my own credit report until I was 26. I want to tell you why I pulled it, because the why is the seed of how all of this started to come out. Last March, my parents asked me to co-sign a refinance on their house. The request had come at a Sunday dinner. My father had explained that interest rates had moved, and that the bank had told them they could refinance at a much better rate, but that the bank wanted a co-signer due to my parents' age and a slight dip in their credit score. He had said he would not normally ask, but that the savings would be significant, and that I would have no real exposure because the house was in good standing. He had said the request was not a big deal. He had said it 3 times in 5 minutes, which I noticed. I told my parents I would think about it. I drove home that night. I sat in my apartment. Something about the request had felt wrong, but I could not put my finger on what. I had not been thinking about money in any clear way for years. I had a stable job, a stable apartment, a small but consistent savings account. I had assumed my financial life was uncomplicated. I pulled my credit report the next morning, mostly to make sure I would not be a liability on the co-signing if I decided to do it. What I found when the report came up on my screen made me sit at my kitchen table without breathing for almost a full minute. There were 7 credit cards on my report. They had all been opened on the same day. The day was October 14th, 8 years and 3 days earlier. The day had been my 18th birthday. The cards had a combined balance of $40,212. The cards had been paid on time, every month for almost 8 years. The minimum payments had been low. The principal had not been touched. The accounts had been quietly accumulating interest while remaining technically in good standing. I sat at the table for a long time. I did not call my parents. I did not call my brother. I did what I do when something is wrong, which is what I had been doing since I was a small child, trying to figure out what was happening in our house when nobody would explain it to me. I started writing things down. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the dollar amount. I wrote down the names of the credit card issuers. I wrote down the addresses on file for the accounts. The addresses were all my parents' address, not mine. I wrote down the email address used for the online account portals. The email address was a Gmail account I had never seen before, and which used a name I had never heard of as the username. The name was L. Wesley 1986. I had no idea what that meant. I wrote everything down in a notebook. I closed the notebook. I went to work. I taught American history to 4 periods of 10th graders that day. I came home. I made dinner. I sat with my notebook again. I had a decision to make. I could call my parents and ask them about the cards directly, or I could investigate first. I want to tell you why I chose to investigate first. The choice matters. I chose to investigate because of something my mother had said to me 3 years earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon when I had stopped by the library to bring her lunch. She had been at the front desk. She had been distracted. She had not heard me come in. She had been on the phone with someone, in a hushed voice, saying something I had not been able to make out except for one phrase. The phrase had been, Wesley1986@gmail.com. I had remembered it because she had spelled it out slowly, the way you spell out an address you are dictating to a stranger. I had assumed at the time that it was a library account or something work-related. I had filed the email address away in the part of my mind that holds small, odd things that do not yet have a place. I had not thought about it again until I saw it on my own credit report 3 years later. The email address on the credit cards opened in my name was the same email address my mother had been spelling out at the library, on a phone call she had not known I was witness to, 3 years before I knew the cards existed. I am a history teacher. I am very, very good at noticing when a date or a name or a small detail does not fit the pattern. The Leslie 1986 email did not fit the pattern. The pattern, until that afternoon, had been that my parents were the people I thought they were, in the family I thought I had. The Leslie 1986 email was a note, written in the margin of my own life, that I had not been the one to write. Somebody else had been keeping a margin in my own life without my knowing. I started looking. I did not tell anybody. I did not tell Hamza. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell my best friend Indira. I worked the way I had been taught to work in graduate school. Slowly, carefully, documenting everything, building a case before I told the case to anybody. The Leslie 1986 email, I figured out within a week, had a small public footprint. The username had been used to leave a comment 11 years earlier on an obscure blog about families dealing with addiction. The comment was 3 sentences long. It was signed only with the username. The blog post had been about a parent in recovery losing access to a child. The comment had said, "I am 36 years old. I have been clean for 7 years. I have not seen my daughter in 7 years. I am writing you because I do not know who else to write." The comment was 11 years old. I subtracted 7 from the date of the comment. The result was a date about 4 years before I had been born. The math did not work for me. I was not the daughter the comment was about, unless the dates were off, unless I had been born earlier than I thought I had been born, unless something else was wrong. I went looking for my own birth certificate. I did not have a copy. I had never needed one. I asked my mother, casually, where my birth certificate was. She said she had a copy somewhere in the house, but that she would have to dig for it. She said she would get it for me. She brought it to me the following Sunday at dinner. The certificate looked normal. It listed my parents as my mother and father. It listed the hospital. It listed the date. The certificate was a state-issued amended certificate. I did not say anything. I did not know yet what an amended certificate was. I went home and looked it up. An amended certificate is the certificate that is issued when a child is adopted, with the adoptive parents' names listed as if the child had been born to them. The original certificate, with the biological parents' names, is sealed in a separate file that is not released without a court order in most states. California is one of the more restrictive states in this regard. To get a copy of the original, you generally need to go through a process called a confidential intermediary, which can take months. I did not have months. I had a feeling, sitting at my kitchen table that night, that whatever my parents had been hiding from me, they had been hiding for a very long time, and the time was running out for some reason. I did not yet know what that reason was. I just knew, with the kind of knowing you cannot explain in a courtroom, but that turns out to be right more often than not, that the clock was running. I called Genevieve Castellanos. Genevieve is an estate attorney I had become friends with through a teacher's book club a few years earlier. She works in adoption law as a side practice. I told her I needed her help. She told me to come to her office on Saturday. I told Genevieve everything I had found. The credit cards, the email, the blog comment, the birth certificate. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I had finished, she said, "Tahira, I need you to brace yourself. 2 things are about to happen. The first is that I am going to start the legal process to get your original birth certificate. The second is that I am going to ask you something difficult. Do your parents have a storage unit anywhere?" I told her I did not know. "Find out," she said. "If they do, ask to see it. If they have one, what you are looking for is in there." I asked her how she knew. "Because I have done this work for 15 years, she said, "and because every set of adoptive parents who have hidden the truth from a child has eventually accumulated a paper trail that they cannot bring themselves to throw away. The trail will be in a storage unit. It will be in a basement. It will be in a brown cardboard box. I have seen it more times than I can count. The fact that they kept it is the saving grace. They kept it because somewhere underneath all of this, they wanted you to find it eventually. Look in storage." My parents had a storage unit. I had known this for years. They kept old furniture in it, holiday decorations, my grandmother's china. The unit was in a town about 2 hours from where they lived, near a small house they had once owned and sold. I had been there once when I was a teenager. I knew the address. I waited until my parents went on a weekend trip to visit my aunt in Phoenix. I drove out to the storage unit on a Saturday morning. I let myself in with a key my father had given me years ago, in case anything ever happened to him and I needed to access important documents. The unit had stacks of boxes. Most of them were what I expected. Old kitchen equipment, my brother's school papers, some of my own old notebooks. I went through them slowly, one box at a time. I found nothing for almost 3 hours. I found the brown cardboard box at the back, behind a stack of broken chairs. The box was unmarked. It had been sealed with packing tape years ago, then opened, then resealed several times. The tape had been used and reapplied so many times that the cardboard underneath was warped. I took the box down. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the storage unit. I cut the tape with a small knife I had brought with me. What was inside that box rearranged everything I thought I knew about my own life. There were 43 letters. They were all addressed to me at my parents' home address. They were all unopened except for one. They were all from a woman named Maeve O'Sullivan. The first letter was dated October 14th, the day I had turned 11 years old. The last letter was dated October 14th, 3 months before the Saturday I was sitting on the storage unit floor. There was one letter for every birthday from age 11 to age 26. 15 years of letters. There was also a folder with documents. The documents were copies of medical bills. They were copies of a will. They were copies of a hospice care contract. They were copies of receipts from a medical research nonprofit. There was a small photograph of a woman with red hair, in her early 30s, holding a baby. The photograph was dated on the back, in handwriting I did not recognize. The date was 3 weeks after my own birthday in the year I had been born. The handwriting on the back said, "Tahira and her mom, before goodbye." There was a copy of my original birth certificate. The mother listed on the original birth certificate was Maeve O'Sullivan. I sat on the floor of the storage unit for almost 2 hours. I read the most recent letter first, the one from 3 months earlier. The handwriting was tired. The words were careful. The letter said, "Tahira, I do not know if you will ever read this. I do not know if your parents will ever give you these letters. I am writing it anyway because writing it is the closest I will get to talking to you, and I want to talk to you before I run out of time. I have been told I have somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks left. I am at peace with this. What I am not at peace with is the possibility of dying without having said hello to you, even once. I gave you up because I needed to. I was not a safe parent to you when you were born. I have been clean for 19 years. I have spent every one of those years thinking about you. I am not asking you to come visit me. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am just letting you know, in case anybody ever lets you know, that you have always been loved. Your name was given to you by your father and me before you were born. Tahira. It means pure. We named you that because we knew even then that we were going to fail you. And we wanted you to know, on whatever piece of paper they let you have, that what you were was pure. Love, the woman who had you first, Maeve. I cried. I cried in the storage unit for a long time. I cried the kind of cry where you do not know, while it is happening, when it is going to stop. I read all the other letters. They were the letters of a woman who had been trying to be present in her child's life from a distance, with no help, with no contact, with no knowledge of whether her child had ever heard of her. They were the letters of a woman who had stopped using drugs the year I was placed for adoption, and who had spent the next 19 years rebuilding herself into a person worth knowing, just in case the day ever came when she got to introduce herself. The day was almost out of time. By the date of the last letter, she had 3 weeks. I want you to understand what I did next because I have thought about it many times since. I did not call my parents. I did not confront them yet. I drove home from the storage unit. I packed a small overnight bag. I drove to the hospice care facility where my biological mother was. The address was on the most recent piece of mail in the folder. The hospice was 40 miles from my apartment in Sacramento. I had passed it on the freeway hundreds of times. I called Genevieve from the parking lot. I told her where I was. I told her I had found everything. I told her I was going to walk in. She told me to be careful. She told me she would be available all night. I walked into the hospice at 6:15 in the evening. I told the front desk that I was there to see Maeve O'Sullivan. The receptionist asked me my name. I told her my name. She looked at the screen. She looked at me. She looked at the screen again. She said, "Maeve has been hoping for this day for a long time." She paged a nurse. The nurse came to the desk. The nurse was a young woman with glasses and a name tag that said Adesina. Adesina looked at me. She said, "Are you Tahira?" I told her yes. "Maeve wrote down a list a long time ago," Adesina said. "It is in her file. The list is the people she would like to see if they ever come. You are at the top of the list. I want to take you in carefully. She is going to be very emotional. She is also very weak. We will need to keep the visit short." I followed Adesina down the hall. I do not remember the walk. I remember only that I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body, the way you do when something enormous is happening, and your nervous system has decided to step a few feet away from you for a while, so that you do not have to feel it all at once. Maeve was in a small room with a window. She was small. Her hair was thin. She was the woman in the photograph from the box. And she was someone else, the way people are someone else when they are dying. She saw me come in. Her eyes filled up before I had reached the bed. I sat down next to her. I did not know what to say. She said, "Tahira, oh Tahira, they told me you did not want to know me." "Maeve," I said, "I just found out yesterday." She closed her eyes. She did not say anything for almost a minute. When she opened her eyes again, she said, I had wondered so many times if it was possible they were lying. I never knew for sure." We talked for about an hour. We did not talk about anything dramatic. She did not have the energy for drama. We talked about my childhood. We talked about her recovery. We talked about my work as a teacher. She told me my biological father had died of an overdose when I was 3. She told me she had been the only one who could not raise me, and she had given me up because she had wanted me to have a chance. She told me she had been told by my parents, on multiple occasions over the years, that I had grown up to be a happy person who did not have any interest in knowing where I had come from. She told me she had believed that for a long time. She told me she had stopped believing it about 3 years ago, when she had read about a study in adopted children that suggested most adoptees, by their 20s, had at least asked. She told me she had kept writing the letters anyway. She told me the letters had been for her, more than for me eventually. She told me she had needed to keep telling me she existed, even if I never heard her saying it. I held her hand. I asked her if she was tired. She said yes. I told her I would come back the next day. I told her I would come every day for the rest of the time she had. She told me she would like that. I drove home. I sat in my apartment until 2 in the morning, with the box of letters on my coffee table. I called Genevieve at 1 in the morning because I needed to talk to a person, and she was the person who had told me to find the box. I went to see Maeve every day for the next 19 days. I read her the letters in order, the ones she had written me and never sent through any other route. I read them aloud to her so she could hear them in her own voice through me. We talked about everything we had time to talk about. She met my brother Hamza, who I told the truth to on the second night, and who had come with me on day 3 and had cried in the hallway before going in. She did not meet my parents. I had told my parents what I had found on the night of day 3. I had asked them to come to my apartment. I had laid the contents of the box on my coffee table. I had asked them to sit down. I had not asked them questions. I had told them instead that I had found everything. I had told them I had been to the hospice. I had told them I had met Maeve. I had told them that the credit cards in my name were a separate problem we would deal with separately, but that the credit cards were not the worst thing they had done. The worst thing they had done was hide her from me. The worst thing they had done was tell her, for 19 years, that I did not want to know her. My mother cried. My father did not cry, but he sat very still and looked at his hands. My mother said, "Tahira, we were trying to protect you." "Mom," I said, "I know you were. I know you thought you were. I want you to hear me very clearly. I am not asking you to defend the decision. I am not even asking you to apologize for it. I am telling you what you did. You hid my mother from me. You let her think I did not want her. She has been writing to me for 15 years. I am 26 years old. I have 3 weeks before she dies. I am going to spend those 3 weeks with her. I am going to take care of her. I am going to be there at the end. I am going to do all of that because it is what I want to do, and because it is the right thing to do, and because I have a chance to do it that I would not have had if I had not happened to look at my credit report on a Tuesday in March." My father said, "Tahira, we will pay off the cards." "Dad," I said, "the cards are the smallest thing on the table right now. I do not care about the cards tonight. The cards are paperwork. We will deal with the paperwork. I want to talk about the paperwork after Maeve is gone. I do not have the energy to talk about it right now. My mother said, Tahira, we love you. Mom, I said, I know you love me. I love you too. The love is real. The love is not what is in question. What is in question is what you did with the love. You used the love to make a decision for me that I should have been allowed to make. You used the love to hide a person from me who was not yours to hide. The love was real. The decision was wrong. Both can be true. I need you to hold both. I am working on holding both. I am going to need you to work on it too. I sat with my parents for another hour. I do not think any of us slept that night. I want to tell you what I decided about the rest of it, because the rest of it is the part that matters. Maeve died on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks and 1 day after I had walked into her hospice room. I was holding her hand. Hamza was there. Adesina was there. My biological mother died with the daughter she had given up holding her hand. She had not had to die alone, the way she had spent 19 years preparing herself to. I went to her funeral. I planned it with the small group of people who had known her. There were 17 people there. Most of them were people from her recovery community. 2 were her sponsors over the years. 1 was a former neighbor. They told me stories about her. They told me she had talked about me every year on my birthday. They told me she had kept a small framed photograph of me on her dresser for as long as they had known her. Although where she had gotten the photograph, I have not yet figured out. My parents did not come to the funeral. I did not invite them. They did not ask to come. I think they understood, on the level where understanding happens without speaking, that the funeral was not theirs to attend. After the funeral, I told my parents I would not be co-signing their refinance. They did not argue with me. I think they had known I would not. They had not been planning to ask at first. The financial situation had pushed them toward asking, and the asking was what had pulled the thread that unraveled everything. My father took a part-time job at a hospital pharmacy to help with the income. They sold some furniture from the storage unit. They paid off the credit cards on their own, slowly, over the next several months. The cards came off my credit report. I have been monitoring it. I did not cut my parents out. I want to be honest about that. I had a decision to make, and the decision was not the one a movie would have made for me. I decided that I was not going to walk away from them. I was also not going to pretend the last 26 years had been what they had told me they were. I was going to keep being their daughter, in a different way than I had been before. I was going to come for Sunday dinner once every 2 weeks instead of every week. I was going to ask my mother questions about Maeve when I felt able to. I was going to let my mother answer or not answer. I was going to let my father, who had been quieter through all of this than my mother, sit in his guilt for as long as he needed to sit in it. I was not going to rush him. I have spent the last 8 months in a relationship with my parents that is different from the one I had before. We are slower. We are quieter. There are more silences at dinner. The silences are not bad. The silences are the small daily work of figuring out how to sit at a table together when the truth has finally arrived. Hamza and I are closer than we have ever been. He has carried his own version of this story for 15 years, and now we are carrying ours together. And the carrying is lighter when it is shared. I want to tell you what I have learned because I think this may matter to somebody who is sitting somewhere right now, listening to this, with a story in their own family that has not yet broken open. Some lies are told out of love. That does not make them less of lies. It just makes them more difficult to forgive, because the person you would have to be angry at was trying to protect you. The hardest discovery in any family is the discovery that the people who hurt you the most also loved you the most. Both were true, the entire time. The work of being an adult, in a family that did this to you, is figuring out how to hold both of those truths at once, without flattening either. You can be angry at somebody and still love them. You can love somebody and still be angry. You can spend the rest of your life with somebody who hurt you, on terms that you set yourself, that they did not set for you. You can include them in your life without including them in every decision you make. You can have Sunday dinners with people who lied to you for 26 years, and the dinners can still be real, if you have decided what to do with the lies. The thing nobody told me, when I was sitting in the storage unit reading those letters, was that I would have a choice in the months that followed. I would not be required to forgive. I would not be required to walk away. I would be allowed to do something quieter and harder and more honest than either of those options. I would be allowed to stay, but on different terms. I would be allowed to keep my parents, but to also keep the truth they had hidden from me. The two things would not have to cancel each other out. If you have just discovered that somebody you love has been protecting you from something painful by hiding it from you, I want you to know that the rest of your life is not going to be a single decision you have to make right now. The rest of your life is going to be 1,000 small decisions made over years, and you are going to make them one at a time, with the people you love, with the truth in the room with you, with the lies named out loud so they cannot keep doing what they were doing in the dark. The work is slow. The work is honest. The work is the only thing that turns a family with a secret into a family that is actually living together. I want to ask you something before you go. Tell me in the comments the moment you discovered something a loved one had been hiding from you to protect you. Tell me what you decided to do with the discovery. Tell me whether you stayed or left or stayed differently. Tell me what you would tell somebody who is sitting right now where you sat then. There are a lot of us doing this work in our own quiet corners. We have not been talking to each other enough about it. Tell me your version. I will be reading every comment. I will see you in the next one.